if you're a conservative, you're not a big fan of Alec Baldwin. But if you're a human being, you can be empathetic even when someone you don't like has had a horrible experience.
She was someone who was loved by everyone who worked with and liked by everyone who worked with and admired.
Is that real? Is that acting? Are those fake tears? Let's chat about that. I actually wanted to get to this a few days ago. I realized this is out of the news cycle now. They're talking about Jussie Smollett and the fact that he ripped into the prosecutor for using the N-word, even though the prosecutor was actually reading Jussie's texts out loud. And he took umbrage with that, said, "How dare you use the N-word? He's reading your stuff so the jury can understand context of what you were up to, Jussie." That said, and we got another little scandal brewing at CNN. Apparently, Don Lemonhead has been tipping off Jussie as to what his sources are revealing, what the police and the prosecution have on Jussie. But it's okay. Don Lemon isn't going anywhere. He's a minority, and he's gay, and he's talentless. He gets drunk on air on New Year's Eve, and who else can get away with saying to a female CNN contributor on air while he's drunk on New Year's Eve, "Hey, nice rack"? That said, we'll put that all aside. I've wanted to get to this Alec Baldwin interview that he did following the death of his cinematographer on his movie Rust. And there was such the big dust up immediately. A lot of the Hollywood elites, "We gotta stop using guns in movies." Right, you just put your finger up and go bang. Then again, I know there are prop guns, but if you're going for realism and to get the flash, etc., I get it. But Alec, you talk about a guy that, on the one hand, you don't want to think it was deliberate, and I don't think that it was. But on the other hand, he reveals what a narcissistic sociopath that he is. All right, we have a young woman who is dead. The gun was in his hand, but he's not responsible.
Well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger.
So you never pulled the trigger?
No. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them, never.
I can tell you, I have been around guns my entire life. My father was a licensed gunsmith and gun dealer in the People's Republic of New York under Mario Cuomo. If you can get your gun license in the state of New York, you're an expert in my book. So I grew up around guns, grew up around handguns, was shooting handguns when I was 9, 10 years old with my father on a shooting range under proper supervision. A single action revolver, all you have to do is depress the hammer and the gun goes off. Now, sometimes when you pull the hammer back, it just automatically locks. It will lock into each position. There are revolvers where, whether they've had work done on them or it's just their way they were designed, you can pull the hammer back, not all the way back. It's not cocked. You don't even have to have your finger on the trigger. But if you let go of the hammer itself, you just fired the weapon. But CNN, having a random act of journalism, and over the fact that, ABC with George Snuffleupagus scored this big interview, and Baldwin didn't give the interview to CNN, they decided, got to go after Georgie, got to go after ABC. So they actually did something pretty impressive at CNN. They brought on a firearms expert who works in the movie industry to show you that what Baldwin said is a complete and total crock.
Alec Baldwin made the claim that he never pulled the trigger, that what he did was he pulled the hammer back and then released it. Explain to us
exactly what happened.
Okay, explain to me what he's claiming and how plausible that is.
Okay, so not plausible. On a single action revolver, when you pull the hammer back, which is an intentional act, click, 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 click. Now the hammer is set. When you pull the hammer back and let go, as you can see, I'm not holding this, the hammer doesn't go anywhere. When you press the trigger, which is, I'm going to do it with this finger so you can see what a minute act that is. It takes very little to press the trigger there. So option one, he pressed the trigger, but it was such a minor press that he wasn't aware that he had, ordered that signal from his brain. Or option B, he's holding the gun with the trigger depressed. Now, on this gun, it doesn't matter which order you go in. You can either cock the gun and you can fire it with the trigger, or you can press the trigger and then cock the gun. And if you release it at this point, it falls and the gun fires. So if, as he is cross-drawing, his finger is on the trigger, which he may have interpreted as just resting on the trigger, but with a 1 millimeter pull, that would be sufficient. Now he pulls the hammer back and then releases it. He doesn't have to press the trigger again if he's already got pressure on it in order for the gun to fire. And I think that's really a key point in this matter.
Maybe if Hollyweird wasn't constantly at war with the NRA and those of us who support the Second Amendment, despite the fact that most movie stars either own a gun or they have a security detail. Because none of them go out and about without protection. Unless you're Jussie Smollett in the city of Chicago at 2:30 in the morning during a polar vortex in the middle of, quote, MAGA country, where you allow yourself to be put in harm's way and jumped by Trump people because we know that Chicago is just crawling with Trump people because, again, quote, it's MAGA country. No, most movie stars, most celebrity personalities either are carrying a weapon themselves or they have the money to have their own private security. That all said, they will not want you to be able to exercise your Second Amendment rights. They will constantly vilify the NRA and hold fundraisers trying to stop the NRA. Maybe if they actually worked with the NRA and brought actual trained NRA instructors onto the set, not just a prop person that makes sure that the gun is not loaded, which apparently we had a bad faux pas there because the gun was loaded with live ammo. And I'm sorry, his whole explanation, it was a misfire. Even the sheriff who's investigating this said guns just don't go off by themselves. Boom, bada bing. His assistant director claims, I never saw his finger on the trigger. It was outside the trigger guard the whole time. Yeah, okay, and again, I'm not accusing him of doing this deliberately, but he has certainly done this interview to try to taint a jury pool because he knows charges are coming. Baldwin knows charges are coming, and he's trying to get out in front of this. The problem is his story holds no water. Gun experts are all over this, but even beyond that, there's this.
She was someone who was loved by everyone who worked with and liked by everyone who worked with and admired.
Okay, he's crying. She was a wonderful person. This never should have happened to her. But then he says he is not responsible, therefore he feels no guilt.
You felt shock. You felt anger. You felt sadness. Do you feel guilt?
No. I feel that there is, I feel that someone is responsible for what happened, and I can't say who that is, but I know it's not me.
What kind of human being is involved in the death, accidental death at this point, of another person and says, of course I don't feel guilty. I feel bad, but I don't feel guilty. This is what we call a Freudian slip. In the secular world, scripturally we would say, be sure your sin will find you out. God is built into man, into our nature, the ability to not be able to lie and the ability for others to detect that we're lying. Whether it's something we say, something we don't say, the way we conduct our body language, our nerve impulses, that's what a lie detector works off of. God said, be sure your sin will find you out. Baldwin had the gun in his hand. I believe it's accidental, but it is manslaughter. It's manslaughter. Now, I know they'll try to blame the prop guy for handing him a loaded weapon. It should have been cold. It should have been empty. But again, had you had an NRA trained instructor working with your actors, training them about firearms, whenever you're handed a weapon, even if somebody who just handed it to you says it's empty, once that weapon is in your hands, you are directly responsible for it. You should check the weapon yourself to make sure it is in fact empty. And when you handle enough weapons, you can tell just by the weight of the weapon as you hold it if it's empty or not. We'll give Alec the benefit of the doubt that he doesn't handle enough of them to really understand it, but once it was placed in his hand, he should have, and he was obligated to check the weapon. He drew the weapon, it was in his hand when it went off. Whether it was deliberate or accidental, it went off in his hand. And at this point, we believe it was accidental. I think it was something as simple as when he released that hammer, he did not realize when you have a live round in there, just releasing the hammer like that is the same as pulling the trigger. This is manslaughter. But what really, going out, doing this interview, crying, then saying you feel no guilt, and then he wonders why he's getting backlash. First of all, why is he doing an interview now? It's really hard to sit here and try to be objective considering this is Alec Baldwin. This is a guy who is nasty, rotten, and vile to anyone on the political right. We're not even talking about his bad Trump impersonations on Saturday Night Live. This guy has a history of a nasty, volatile temper. He has had altercations with private citizens that have been caught on video. He has had altercations with the police. He has had altercations with his own daughter on an answering machine, referring to her as a fat, selfish pig. This is a sociopath. Only a sociopath says, no, I don't feel any guilt. Yeah, but the gun was in your hand. Yeah, but it wasn't my fault. See, a sociopath, it's always somebody else's fault. It's always somebody else's problem. If I was driving my car, and I think you would be this way too, if we were driving our cars and out of nowhere, a child just darted out in front of us before we could stop the car and we hit and killed that child. We didn't plan to do that. That was not on our agenda that day. And by all eyewitness testimony, there was nothing we could do to stop the car in time. It happened that quick, that unplanned, that unexpected. Not your fault. Not my fault. I'm still going to feel guilty. You are too. And for a long time, we're going to think things like, why did I drive down that street? Why didn't I go down this other street? What did I really have to go where I was going then? Did I have to go right then? Could it have waited? We would spend a lifetime beating ourselves up, getting some counsel and some help. And Baldwin kills a woman, and other comments in that interview didn't even sink into him till 45 minutes later that he'd actually shot her. He thought maybe she fainted. This guy is a narcissist, a sociopath. It's all about him. He did that interview to try to spin a narrative, try to set the agenda, try to direct how people are thinking, to already plant the reasonable doubt in a potential jury pool mind, because it's all about him. He doesn't give a flip about her. And those tears, what tears? Hands are over the eyes. He's a trained actor. Hey, that's it for this little rant. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you give us a thumbs up, like this channel, spread this video to your social media platforms, and spread the word that we're here.